Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Real National Dialogue with myself, Jonathan Mokes, and Paul Berkowitz. Paul, how are you doing today?
Jonathan, always lovely to speak to you. I'm great. We are having a lovely warm winter's day on the Highveld. Had to take off my vest. I was overheating. But enough about me. What are we talking about today?
Well, it wouldn't be a South African political discussion if we didn't talk about the crisis in the criminal justice cluster after General Mkhwanazi's explosive allegations the previous week. Cyril Ramaphosa has finally responded, so we'll have a chat about that. I think it's also probably good to chat through the now postponed, I think for the fourth time or fifth time, ANC National Executive Committee meeting that was supposed to be this weekend. Paul Mashatile is in China as a part of the trade diversification strategy, which we alluded to last week. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a Wednesday if there were no by-elections. So we have a few by-election results and potential by-elections, not potential, they actually are happening next tomorrow. So we'll go through that and probably a little bit more. So, shall we go on to the Commission of Inquiry that, surprise, surprise, another Commission of Inquiry announced by President Ramaphosa? So, for those that may have been sleeping under a rock, we have the criminal justice sector rocked by allegations from the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Police Commissioner the previous week, implicating Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. Basically, organized crime has infiltrated the criminal justice sector. Lots of allegations, which we covered in depth last week. President Ramaphosa was in Rio de Janeiro at the time. He indicated that he would respond to it. It took him a week to be able to address the nation. He did address the nation on Sunday evening. I think it was a 12-minute address that he was 30 minutes late for. He basically repeated what the issue was, indicated that there would be a commission of inquiry, that there would be interim reports in 3 to 6 months, didn't specify when a final report would be expected. He's placed the police minister on special leave. He has
With full
indicated,
pay?
with full pay, of course, it's a nice gig if you can get it. He has indicated that a new acting minister will be appointed from the beginning of August. There's some interesting constitutional issues about that. So Faraz Kachalia is coming in from outside. He's not a member of parliament. The president is allowed to do that, but there is a question. Well, he's allowed to appoint an outsider as a minister, but it's constitutionally questionable whether someone who is from the outside coming in is able to take on an acting portfolio. So it gets a little bit murky. That's an issue that the EFF and MK have been talking about. And then I think until Kachalia is ready to assume his role, Mameluko Kubai, the Justice and Constitutional Development Minister, will be acting until the beginning of August. So that's what happened. I wrote probably a little bit of an angry piece for the South Africa Brief this morning on that. So my
You
thoughts are
haven't read
pretty
it?
pretty clear.
If you're watching and you haven't read it, you must read it. You must go read it after you watch us now. But there's a lot to be angry about, and I think Jonathan, yes, it was a very focused piece, you focused your ire, and I think a lot of us are angry. You have nothing to feel sorry for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean maybe just to kick off the discussion, and a lot of people have said this, and I started off by saying another commission of inquiry. So a lot of South Africans' eyes were rolling. I mean, we've had multiple commissions of inquiries, we have multiple investigations, we have dialogues, national dialogues, nowhere near as good as this particular real national dialogue that we're on,
Still free.
and still free, not 700 million rand. But, Cyril Ramaphosa is just ultimately indecisive. It staggers me that essentially what he spoke about, he could not have released even from Rio de Janeiro, wherever he happened to be, in the day or 48 hours after Makhonazi went with his press conference. I don't think that that statement, essentially, that he just read to camera, had to wait a week. I mean, he says he would have needed to have consulted and whatnot, but he is the president, and this required decisive action. The Zondo Commission of Inquiry was supposed to have taken, I think, 180 days when it was first set up. It took, if I'm not mistaken, about 4 years for the actual report to be issued. Has the report been acted upon? I think I referenced in my piece today, there's implicated cabinet members that are still in cabinet, sitting around the cabinet table. No action's been taken. Fundamentally, I think what upset me about Sunday evening was A, it took so long. B, another commission of inquiry. I think there probably is stronger action that Ramaphosa could have taken. We can talk about what that is. Thirdly, I just find that the president is disrespecting South Africans when he looks relatively disinterested. He was late. I know it's 30 minutes late, but it's just disrespectful for the South African people and the people that put him into office. He never takes questions, and I think this would have been a wonderful opportunity to clarify a lot of stuff. And ultimately, this is probably just going to drag on, cost more money, and South Africans don't feel safe at the best of times. We often talk about this. And now they have absolutely no reason to believe that there can actually be reform of the criminal justice cluster. But that's me essentially repeating my rant, which again you can read if you go and check out the South Africa Brief from Substack. But yeah, Paul, what's your thinking? And probably more specifically, I mean, people like me are moaning about another commission of inquiry, but what other options do you think were available to Ramaphosa to be able to deal with this?
Well, he could have fired him. He
Mm,
could have suspended him without pay. He could have, I don't know, launched a special investigation, which could have taken quicker. He could have limited the time and the terms and made it very tight on the Commission of Inquiry. But as we know, since before 94, since apartheid days, commissions of inquiry are not there to solve problems. They are there to bury problems. And the ANC government, ANC-led government, ANC president, continuing in fine tradition of decades past. There could be criminal proceedings. I know the DA have laid charges. I know
mm,
other parties are threatening to lay charges. Um, I saw on Twitter today, related, Jonathan, that this only silver lining in this is that there are huge employment and growth opportunities in being panels on commissions of inquiry or eminent persons in the national dialogue. So from within the house, from South Africa, I think we are very cynical. I think everyone is sharing the same anger.
mm,
Um, we've spoken before about how do the different parties respond, and not most, quite a few of the parties within the GNU, and of course the MK and the EFF on the opposition benches, but the DA, of course, smaller parties, some have been more vocal than others about speaking out against what actions that might be taken. I know that the DA has asked Parliament specifically for further debate to happen around this issue. Something that we haven't spoken about, but the DA, I mean, the DA, we have spoken about the DA working all the angles of being in
mm,
opposition to the ANC while being within the GNU. And we spoke last week about how I agree that this may be the biggest threat to the GNU if there was
mm,
any action. But like we said, if Ramaphosa was serious, if he was able and willing to put the country above the party, then he would have come home and made a decisive decision.
mm,
He wouldn't have spent a week wasting our time, disrespecting us to deliver a nothing statement. He's not a decisive man. He's not a particularly hardworking man, I'm sorry to say.
mm,
And he is our president. Um, I find it I'm thinking about a possible scenario, Jonathan, where the DA, the EFF, and MK, not necessarily possible coalition partners. They don't have a majority. Collectively, they
Mm,
have a bit more than the ANC, but it's still about 44, 45%. But I see them working more closely together in opposition to the ANC because of this particularly, but all the other mistakes and problems and missteps that the ANC and ANC-aligned ministers have made. So voting against budget votes, which the DA has openly said they will do, and I think the EFF and MK are most likely to join them. Voting together in some of the plenary sessions that are coming up this week and next week on the budget.
mm,
Um, I think it is a case. I don't think they'll work together, Jonathan. It's a case of the dog could catch the car, maybe chew it
mm.
out and get the car to crash, but we'll have no hope of driving the car together in partnership. But yeah, I think that the DA will continue to see what to do, whatever it can do to drive a crowbar between it and the ANC while still remaining in the GNU at the moment. Just like the ANC and Ramaphosa aren't taking decisive action. If any of the GNU parties were serious about the ANC's corruption, they would have acted by now. They could have left the
Yeah.
coalition. They could have put it on notice. They could have done different things.
Mm. Yeah, I think two points from my side, and maybe starting with this with where you've left off. I think I write in the piece I've written on this, what will this mean for the GNU? Because it could potentially still be a turning point in the GNU. We know a party such as the DA does very, very close polling. I'd be fascinated to know if they're going to do any focus groups on this, if they are going to look at what people think about crime and how much this issue has actually cut through to ordinary South Africans on the ground, because this would be a very, very powerful red line for the DA to draw if it is looking for an exit, and because I think you don't want to be associated with this kind of corruption, with this kind of organized crime going into a local government election, unless, as you've said, they think that they can achieve an opposition to the ANC by still threading the needle as they have done by staying in the GNU. But it becomes increasingly difficult. I mean, John Steenhuisen said in response to Ramaphosa, yes, we're not satisfied with another commission of inquiry, but also you've acted against Senzo Mchunu. What about Simelane? What about Nkabane? What about the other ministers? The DA continues to sit at cabinet meetings and in a government with those ministers. So at what point does that become untenable for them? It probably becomes untenable when it becomes untenable for their voters. And that's probably what they're watching closely. I think other GNU partners, the IFP in particular, which is interesting because obviously the IFP is a KZN party, and the political killings, as we said last week, does affect it. Is it a red line for them? Again, probably not, unless they feel it's going to hurt their voters. There's some opportunities for some of the smaller parties to really drive this issue particularly hard and make a very principled stance. But again, very, very tricky to leave a GNU post and a ministerial post. So it's going to
And
be fascinating.
once you
Yes.
leave, what are your kind of options over the rest of the administration?
Yeah,
Working with the
exactly.
EFF, working with the EFF and MK is not necessarily
Yeah.
attractive. Working with the Action SA aligned grouping, you risk being swallowed within that coalition.
Very much so, as a one two seat party. I think the second point I was going to make, and I think a few people and observers have made this, is that of course what is playing out and tying Ramaphosa's hands behind his back, even though he doesn't really need to allow his hands to be tied, is the ANC. Senzo Mchunu is a key ally of Cyril Ramaphosa and was right from the 2017 ANC conference. He is a KwaZulu-Natal politician. If Cyril Ramaphosa takes decisive action against Mchunu by firing him or by actually allowing criminal charges to be investigated, and allowing the process to follow its course, it becomes very destabilizing for the ANC and all these sort of internal factions. But it still seems that those factions are going to exist no matter what. And again, it'd be lovely to have some insight into Ramaphosa's brain, what actually is stopping him as almost a lame duck presidency. But I mean, you can be lame duck, or you can actually just have the freedom of doing whatever you want, knowing that you've only got 3 years left. Why doesn't he act? The only sort of conclusion we can draw on a general term is that, again, it's him and his colleagues putting the ANC above the country. Because if they really did care about the country, they would make sure that Mchunu was charged and facing a proper criminal investigation. Because I think, as someone, and I apologize to whoever this may be, but I think it's a great quote: a commission of inquiry cannot replace a criminal investigation, and that's what this should be.
This should be a criminal investigation. The DA laid charges. It's laid charges
Mm-hmm.
before. They often go nowhere. We will see.
Yep.
I hope I'm not being complacent, Jonathan. I don't think we have reached that tipping point within the GNU yet. I don't think that we've reached that tipping point within the ANC yet. And maybe one of the excuses, I don't know if it's a good reason for Ramaphosa's inaction, is that everywhere there are factions. And it's not just about the ANC and the NEC, which we'll get to, and in the NWC, in the meetings, or the upcoming conference in 2027, but also about ANC parliamentarians who are divided about working with the DA, and some of whom are ready to write. But at the same time, there are some still smaller parties which are calling for possible motions of no confidence into Ramaphosa. And I don't think we've reached a tipping point where there's going to be some decisive action by him or by any of the parties, but I think we've taken a giant leap towards that tipping point.
Yeah, no, very much so. And let's not forget that the DA, after the firing of Andrew Whitfield, did mention that in their federal executive, they had discussed the possibility of a motion of no confidence against Cyril Ramaphosa, which they decided to hold in abeyance. There is that possibility, and Ramaphosa is incredibly vulnerable if the DA do decide to go, and if the EFF and MK jump on the bandwagon. You've got an interesting scenario. And let's also spare a thought for Andrew Whitfield, because it's quite clear that if you're not an ANC minister or deputy minister, you can actually be fired decisively. And it just does beg a belief that there was just absolute clarity on firing a deputy minister for going on an unauthorized trip. But when you are facing serious allegations of colluding with organized criminal syndicates, you get special leave with full pay. But
Andrew Whitfield, a victim of performative decision-making by Ramaphosa, we remember you.
Absolutely. So, I mean, maybe it's actually a good point on the subject of the GNU, on the subject of ANC factions, to now segue into the NEC. So there was going to be a ANC National Executive Committee meeting this coming weekend. Very much on the agenda, in addition to all the usual reports, was going to be the Government of National Unity. As you've alluded to with the MPs, there's a lot of people in the NEC, potentially a majority of the NEC, who do not want the DA to be in the Government of National Unity any longer. And the tipping point that this majority, or potential majority, or at least significant grouping, the tipping point for them was the budget impasse and the DA taking the government to court, the finance minister to court, to obviously stop the intended VAT hike, which in South Africa now seems almost a decade ago with everything that happens in our country. But so that was going to be on the agenda. What was also going to be on the agenda was preparations for the National General Council, which was, I think, meant originally to be June, July this year. While we're talking, has been shifted to December. It's where the ANC have a very, very big conversation about policy direction. And it's also where you see alliances starting to form and factions starting to form ahead of an elective conference. The ANC has not had an NGC since Jacob Zuma was ANC president. This is something that keeps being kicked down the road, but they were going to talk about that in preparations and agenda. And then, although it was not specifically on the formal agenda, the issue of Senzo Mchunu and what has happened in the criminal justice world was bound to come up. But lo and behold, I think it was reported this morning. We're recording on Tuesday that the NEC meeting has been postponed again. This was as a result of a decision, I think, by the ANC's National Working Council that met, and it has been postponed because there are no reports ready to serve in front of the National Executive Committee. But the big accusation, and I see that media are reporting on leaks from unnamed, as it always is, unnamed anonymous ANC members of the National Working Council, that the main reason that the NEC has been postponed is because the ANC leadership, and particularly from the office of the Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, but I'm sure aligned with President Cyril Ramaphosa, do not want to have a debate about the government of national unity, and they do not want to allow a situation which may result in the NEC voting to instruct the government, which of course is deployed into government by the ANC and ANC parlance, to remove the DA from the coalition. So they are alleging that it's being postponed and postponed and postponed to try and get people canvassed to support Ramaphosa, but to sort of prevent the situation. So it's a bit of a disaster for the ANC. And again, sort of just shows how things are unraveling there. Of course, what will be sort of front and center also of Ramaphosa's mind and Enoch Godongwana's mind will be the budget process that is still unfolding. We're still heading, I think, towards a deadline, which is the end of this month. There's still some budget votes ending with the presidency, but clearly the ANC is not a happy camp at this particular point in time, which does obviously, regardless of everything going on in respect of Senzo Mchunu and how GNU partners respond to that, it also does imperil, clearly the GNU is imperiled from an ANC vantage point, let alone a DA vantage point.
Yeah. Yes, and we've been through this before. I think on an earlier podcast, we had a visualization, Jonathan,
Yeah.
that shows without the DA in the GNU, there's a nominal, I think, 201 seats out of 400. We saw that when the DA decided to vote against Budget 2.0, that the GNU, the remaining GNU members with the ANC passed that budget, which, as you said, was later thrown out in court. Well, the last vestiges of the VAT hike. Yes, and specifically the fiscal framework bill, that first piece of the budget, only passed with, I think, 192 votes to about 180. So without the DA and the GNU, it's going to be a miserable time for the ANC. It means that all ANC MPs need to be in the country and not on overseas jaunts whenever an important vote has to be taken. It means that a chief whip has to work harder than any chief whip has ever worked before in the ANC to get all the bummers on the seats. And it means being able to trust each and every one of the other 8 members of the GNU to vote en bloc. And I don't, as we said before, I don't think the ANC is getting better at consultation. It would be a lot of work for them.
It would be a heck of a lot of work, and based on what we've seen over the past couple of weeks, it wouldn't be able to do it. So I think Ramaphosa has decided that he needs the DA to stay in. I still suspect that the firing of Whitfield, regardless of what may have happened within the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Competition and rumors of issues around the Lotto deal and whatnot, I think Ramaphosa was trying to offer Whitfield as almost red meat as a sacrifice to this ANC lobby, but clearly it hasn't worked. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. But it also appears that Ramaphosa is on very weak ground heading towards 2027. And while all this is happening, Paul, your namesake, the deputy president, Paul Mashatile, is out of the
Yes.
country.
Let's
And
play Carmen Sandiego slash Paul Mashatile. Where in the world is Paul Mashatile?
he is in China and he is attending something called the China International Supply Chain Expo. And he is accompanied there by a number of, I mean, it'll be a big delegation, but none other than the Minister of Tourism, Patricia de Lille, Parks Tao, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, and the Minister of Agriculture, one John Steenhuisen. And
People
apparently
who
this,
should be there. Yeah.
yeah,
And
people who should be there, yes.
people who aren't there under dubious means. So this sounds like a proper government trip for a change.
Yes, yes. It does sound like a proper government trip. And look, I mean, I'm sure Paul Mashatile is, as he is wont to do, is enjoying the opportunity that the trip presents him. But it's good to see we spoke about this extensively last week, the need for trade diversification, the need to look at other options. While this is happening, I think at the end of the week, the US AGOA hearings open up again in Washington. It seems, as we've discussed, I mean, South Africa will have a delegation there. I'm not sure who's part of it, together with representatives from the automotive and citrus and agricultural sectors, talking about the benefits of AGOA. But it looks, as we said last week, highly unlikely that AGOA is going to be renewed in any shape or form, as we recognize. So kudos to the government actually for having a big presence in China, and let's hope that they can bring something back, because it doesn't look like the US tariff of 30% and potentially another 10% if the BRICS attitude persists is going to be lifted. But again, just to repeat Wandile Sihlobo, China can't replace the US. China itself is not going to be good enough. A lot more has to be done. And hopefully, people like Parks Tao, people like John Steenhuisen can be engaging more, as they have been with Europe and with other climates, to sort of diversify this trade approach, because we really need it.
We certainly do, Jonathan. And we've actually, for our premium content, we've been focusing on trade this week. We've broken down South Africa's exports over the last 16, 17 years to look at the trends. And what's quite clear, and with your permission, a little bit of a teaser for our viewers,
Oh,
is
absolutely.
that
Go for it.
China is clearly our biggest trading partner. As you said, and we'll go into it. We're going to be going into it in detail with more Substack posts and with our premium content. But I've got something fun for the viewers. I've got a bar chart race. They're always fun to look at. So here we go.
Great.
So yeah, we did this with the South African export data, Jonathan, to show who are the largest trading partners going all the way back to 2010, and including the full calendar year from last year, 2024. And as you can see right here at the top, China has
Mm,
been our largest trading partner for a while, and by quite a lot.
mm,
And you'll see there's a fight for second place. Okay, so you'll see that China, the US, and Germany have been our most important trading partners for the last 11, 12 years. But what is very nice to see in the top 20 is there are a lot of neighboring African countries,
yeah.
primarily our immediate neighbors, Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique. We export sizably to them. As you've said, though, Jonathan, it's not to whom we export, it's what kind of goods we export.
Mm,
And what we are looking for is partners, existing or new, who would take on some of the agricultural and motor vehicle exports that we're going to lose to the US.
Yeah. Yeah.
If this trip can, headed by Mashatile, can convince the Chinese counterparts to open up a little bit of the trade, because they could, and there is, we've spoken about Wandile Sihlobo has spoken about it in detail, about the relatively high barriers that China has to our wine and our agricultural exports. If we could break into that market a little bit, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Fascinating. Thanks for sharing that bar chart race. It's really, really interesting to see that fight for second place. Interesting to see Germany there. I know that we've started to look a little bit at Germany's relationship with South Africa as a bit of opportunity, and I know that there'll be some pieces probably on that coming out on the South Africa brief towards the end of the year.
Yes.
Paul,
That's
yeah, go for it.
That's a bit delicate, because Germany is definitely the largest EU member, but
Mm,
not close to a majority. I'm not sure. I know that the shares have been diluted in recent years, because the
mm,
original 15 is 27 and more and counting. Uh, uh, Germany definitely, as one of our bilateral trading partners, would have a lot of clout within the EU, possibly to speak to other members of the bloc. But the common agricultural policy is probably one of the toughest nuts to crack in
absolutely.
international trade.
Absolutely. So let's move from trade to electoral politics. So certainly John Steenhuisen and Mr. Mashatile, while they're on their China delegation, they will be putting a keen eye towards what's happening in by-elections on Wednesday, tomorrow. But as before we get there, let's maybe talk about by-elections that were contested last week. We spoke briefly about it. So essentially, last week, the DA was defending three by-elections. There were two in Tshwane. One was a ward, I think it was Ward 44, which the DA had sort of had a good track record. One was Ward 98, which the DA only won with 42% of the votes. And then it was defending a ward in Metsimaholo. So the DA managed to retain all three wards. I think it did pretty impressively in Ward 44, getting 88% of the votes, sorry, my apologies. Ward 98, it got 73% of the vote, up from 42%. Ward 44, it got 88% of the vote, going from 70%. In Metsimaholo, though, they dropped by about 16 percentage points and was probably the Freedom Front's best by-election. But I think the DA, Paul, would be pretty pleased with those results.
I think they'd be pleased with those results, Jonathan, particularly, as you said, Ward 98. Again, turnout low at 16%, but it works for the party. It seems that they've worked out how to efficiently deploy their resources. Again, remember that the by-election is almost always a narrower field than a general election, like in 2021. So and we've spoken about why, if you didn't think you'd have a good chance, you wouldn't want to contest. But let's not take anything away. Really good results for the DA. I think they'll have one eye on the Freedom Front Plus in Metsimaholo, to think about something to think about next year. As we know, that's a municipality where the ANC doesn't have a firm grip. There will
Mm,
almost definitely be a coalition there.
mm. Tomorrow, there are four by-elections. The DA is again defending another ward, Ward 34 in Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. So I think that's the second by-election in the Metro in the space of 2 weeks. There was one in Motherwell, which we've spoken about. So in the local government election, Paul, I think the DA did relatively well in this ward, getting over 60% of the vote, but it was a different story in the provincial election. So they have
Yes.
the PA to worry about tomorrow.
Yes, they do, Jonathan. As you said, in 2021, the DA got 63 64%, if I'm not mistaken, and the runners up were the Northern Alliance. So it is a ward where that party is strong, but they are not. They didn't contest in 2024. What we did see is the the Patriotic Alliance shoot up to about 33-34% in the provincial vote, as you said last year, with the DA dropping to about 52%. And it's a crowded field tomorrow, Jonathan. It's not just the DA and the PA, it's also the ANC, the EFF, the PAC, and the Northern Alliance. So we've got two scenarios. We've got one where the PA can beat the DA, and we'll see a comfortable continuation of that growth trend. Or what the DA is probably hoping for is that the opposition parties all take each other out, and the party retains the seat, even if it's below 50%. But I've been wrong before, and I must repeat, we're not a proper accredited gambling institution or financial institution. But if I were to put down money, I would put down money on the DA falling below 50% in the ward.
Okay. Well, it's going to be an interesting data point on the road to the local government election, and can the PA's sort of recent success in the Western Cape transfer into Nelson Mandela Bay Metro? The signs point that it should, but we will again be back next week to discuss that. 3 other by-elections being contested tomorrow, 2 of which are very, very marginal wards. So there's Ward 13 in Polokwane, which I think is in the Seshego area. So it's an EFF ward that narrowly beats the ANC by 154 votes. The EFF has not been having the greatest by-election year since the general election, didn't have a great general election. I think what's interesting about this particular ward is, can the EFF hold on to the ward, and there'll be turnout differentials and it'll come down to organization. But I don't know if my eyes are deceiving me, Paul, but is it the South African Communist Party I see that is contesting this ward?
It is the South African Communist Party. It's so interesting, Jonathan. The connective tissue is that the SACP actually contested in Metsimaholo. That was last week. We mentioned that. Sasolburg. I think there was a council collapse and a complete redoing of the elections. This was back in, I think, after the 2016 election. They actually won 3 PR seats, if I'm not, or ward seats, and there was an SACP mayor. And yeah, you're right. They are back at local government by-election level, nibbling at the edges, not quite threatening to break away completely from the tripartite alliance, but I'd say they're dipping their toes. There's also the ACP, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm not sure what the acronym is, and the Labour Party contesting that ward. And Seshego, of course, being Julius Malema's home village in Polokwane. And I think maybe some pride on the line for the EFF.
Yeah, well, I think the area that the ward covers is actually called Seshego Juju Valley, so it's very much synonymous with with Malema, even if completely coincidental. But I think the EFF will be hoping that the SACP can split the ANC vote, and that it doesn't come from them. So interesting. So, Paul, moving from Polokwane to KwaZulu-Natal, Ward 23 in Abatgolusi in northern KwaZulu-Natal, IFP are defending a ward. They won it by 95 votes in 2021. The big difference between now and 2021 is there's a party called MK that will be contesting this by-election. And again, is this going to hurt the IFP? Is it going to hurt the ANC? Could MK potentially win it? It's going to be another fascinating data point on the KZN journey to the municipal poll next year.
Yes, definitely. I'm not calling it.
Very
I'm
wise.
not going to even attempt. This is one that, as you said, I think there's three options there. There's three potential outcomes. EFF and Labour are the fourth and fifth parties. I don't think we have to worry about them.
No.
We can take a safe bet they're not going to win. And I think this ward by itself, Jonathan, will tell us that it's obviously a very crowded field. Unless MK can win it significantly and banish the ANC and the IFP to second and third place, I think we'll keep looking. But definitely, highly contested area, could go anyway.
Yeah. Then there's a fourth by-election, and probably this looks like the ANC will at least win one seat in the by-elections tomorrow. This is in Gusha in the Eastern Cape. ANC will be hoping to win Ward 11. It's a seat that an independent won in 2021, but on the PR votes, the ANC was comfortable as it was in the provincial election. It's also notable that it's only, and I say this with no disrespect to them, but it's only really the PAC and Al Jamar that are contesting. I don't think that they're going to be able to beat the ANC, so it looks pretty odds on for an ANC win and a pickup there.
Definitely. I don't think you're wrong. No disrespect. But yes, Al Jamar, bless them, on social media, they're making a go. I've seen of campaigning in this ward. Yeah, I think the only debate is the ANC's margin of victory. If we were wrong, if they get really hurt by Al Jamar and the PAC, that would be a shock result.
It would be significant and would require quite a bit of big discussion on next week's podcast, which brings me to the point, Paul. Thanks as ever. We've come to the end of this week's chat. There's going to be a lot to discuss next week. We're going to unpack these by-elections. We're going to, I'm sure, have further developments in the criminal justice issue to discuss as that unfolds. Probably further developments in some of the machinations in the GNU and internal ANC politics, and then whatever else big national issue or crisis arises, as I'm sure it would do. And you know what's amazing, Paul, is we haven't spoken about Johannesburg once in this podcast, so we'll give it a pass, and we'll have to see if you can come up with something for next week.
I've got a quick story not to delay us. I think we've covered what's important. Something which is concerning is the council is apparently looking to sell off pieces of prime communal property in Joburg Emmarentia Botanical Gardens and the Zoo Lake to developers, and one or two other places as well. It's going to be a big debate and hopefully defeated, and the usual accusations about money-grubbing politicians out for a quick buck and selling off the common land to line their pockets. That is my summary, but yes. That's been your Joburg half-minute tale of woe today. Jonathan, it's always a pleasure. To the viewers, please do keep watching. Tell everybody. Go read Jonathan's article now if you haven't. I also have an article out from I don't know if it's I think it's last week on
last week, yeah.
Trade, and we've got more trade data and content to follow, specifically focusing on the US and possibly China and Germany. Jonathan, always a pleasure. Looking forward already to our discussion next.
Absolutely. Thanks very, very much, Paul. And let me just echo, please do share this as widely as you can. Like and subscribe to the South Africa Brief, and we'll see you next week. Thanks very much.